She had always loved music. Even as a little girl, she would hum melodies while doing her homework, tapping her fingers on the table as if it were a piano. Music was her escape, a place where she felt free and understood. At home, her small room was filled with old sheet music, some tattered from years of handling, and a small second-hand keyboard that had seen better days. It wasn't much, but it was hers and she loved it. Her family was humble. They didn't have money for music lessons or fancy instruments, but they supported her in every way they could. Her parents would sit for hours in the living room, listening as she played simple tunes and tried to mimic songs she heard on the radio. Her little brother would clap along, making her laugh, and that laughter always made her feel like she belonged in the music world. She wasn't naturally confident. Most days, she felt nervous about showing her talent to anyone outside her family. She would imagine herself performing in front of a crowd and then quickly imagine all the ways it could go wrong. What if she played the wrong notes? What if people laughed? The fear of being judged was always there, whispering doubts in her ear. But something inside her kept pushing her forward. She loved music too much to stop. One day, she saw a poster at the community center. A local talent show was coming to town. They were looking for performers of all kinds, and anyone could sign up. Her heart raced as she read the words. This could be her chance, the chance to finally play for more than just her family. But doubt crept in immediately. She had never played in front of strangers before. What if they laughed? What if she wasn't good enough? Her parents noticed her hesitation. Her mother gently took her hand and said, "It doesn't matter what others think. If you love to play, that is enough. Just share it, and let people feel what you feel." Her father nodded in agreement, adding, "Courage isn't not being afraid. It's doing what you love, even when you are scared." Their words stayed with her as she signed up for the talent show. The next few weeks were filled with practice. Every evening, after finishing her homework and chores, she would sit at her keyboard for hours. Her fingers grew tired, but she didn't stop. She practiced scales, tried new songs, and even started composing her own music. Each note she played felt like a small victory, a step toward the day she would perform. She imagined the audience sitting in front of her. She pictured their faces, some smiling, some curious, some doubtful. In her mind, the audience wasn't just strangers. They were people she wanted to connect with through her music. She wanted them to feel the emotions she felt when she played, the joy, the sadness, the hope. But she also imagined them laughing at her mistakes, whispering to each other about how silly she looked. That thought made her stomach twist, but it didn't stop her. It only made her practice harder. On the day of the talent show, the community hall buzzed with excitement. Performers of all ages and talents were preparing backstage. She peeked through the curtain and saw people warming up, tuning instruments, and chatting nervously. The place was bigger than she imagined, filled with bright lights and rows of chairs for the audience. Her heart pounded faster. She had never been in such a big place before, and the reality of performing in front of a crowd hit her all at once. Backstage, she tried to calm herself. She took deep breaths and closed her eyes, imagining herself at home in her room, playing her favorite song. She reminded herself of her parents' words about courage. She wasn't just performing for the judges or the audience. She was performing for herself, for her love of music. That thought gave her a small sense of peace. When it was finally her turn, she walked toward the stage. Every step felt heavy, but she kept moving forward. The audience could see her now, and she could feel their eyes on her. She tried to smile, but it was shaky. Some people whispered to each other, and she heard a few stifled laughs. Her stomach sank, but she remembered why she was there. She took a deep breath and sat down at the keyboard. The hall was quiet now, waiting for her to begin. She placed her fingers on the keys, feeling the familiar texture of the old keyboard. Then she started to play. The first notes were simple but steady. She focused on each sound, letting the music flow through her. Slowly, she felt herself relaxing, and the fear that had weighed her down started to fade. Even as she played, she was aware of the audience. She could hear some people still whispering, some trying not to laugh. But she didn't let it distract her. She poured her emotions into every note, letting her love for music guide her fingers. She imagined telling a story through her song, and as she did, she felt a strange connection with the audience, even though some were skeptical. By the end of her first piece, there was a moment of silence. The audience wasn't sure what to do. She had played with honesty and heart, but they hadn't expected it. She felt a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, they understood. She smiled, feeling a mix of relief and pride. For the first time, she realized that performing wasn't just about impressing others. It was about sharing a piece of herself. As she left the stage, she felt a surge of courage. The audience's laughter had been there, but it didn't define her. She had faced her fear and played anyway. That moment became a turning point, a reminder that bravery isn't about being perfect. It's about being true to yourself. And as she walked off the stage, she knew this was only the beginning of her journey, a journey that would change her life in ways she couldn't yet imagine. The moment she stepped back on stage for her second piece, she could feel the weight of the audience's eyes on her. Some faces were still curious, others skeptical, and a few whispered comments made her heart race. She had expected nerves, but this was something more. A quiet tension that seemed to fill every corner of the room. She gripped the edge of the keyboard, taking a deep breath to steady herself. As she began to play, a few people chuckled softly, clearly not taking her seriously. The sound of laughter, even if faint, made her fingers tremble for a moment. She paused, thinking maybe she should stop, maybe she should leave, but a tiny voice inside reminded her why she was here. She loved music, and music was her voice. No one could take that away from her. She closed her eyes and let herself imagine she was back in her room at home, where the only audience was her little brother and the walls that had heard her practice thousands of times. She remembered her parents' encouragement, the way they always believed in her even when she didn't. The fear started to fade, replaced by determination. She pressed the keys again, letting the melody flow naturally. This time, the notes carried more confidence, more emotion. She poured herself into the music, letting every small feeling she had, the joy, the sadness, the hope, shine through. Her fingers moved faster and smoother, hitting notes she didn't even realize she could reach. The laughter began to fade as the audience slowly became quiet, drawn in by the unexpected depth of her performance. Some people leaned forward in their seats, eyes wide with surprise. Others whispered to their neighbors, questioning how someone so small and seemingly inexperienced could play with such feeling. Even the judges looked astonished, their expressions softening as they realized they had misjudged her at first glance. She noticed a little girl in the front row holding her mother's hand tightly. The girl's eyes were wide, filled with wonder. In that moment, she felt a connection, a reminder that music wasn't about proving herself to everyone. It was about touching people's hearts. Her nerves disappeared completely, replaced by the warmth of sharing something beautiful with others. The hall seemed to hold its breath as she continued. Each note she played told a story, one that spoke of struggles, dreams, and resilience. People who had laughed before now sat silently, their faces reflecting a mix of awe and disbelief. She could hear soft sniffles and the occasional quiet exhale, sounds that meant the music had reached them. Halfway through the performance, she switched to a more emotional piece, one she had composed herself. It was raw and simple but full of meaning. Her story unfolded with every key she pressed, and for the first time, she noticed tears forming in the eyes of some audience members. She felt their emotions mingling with hers, creating a bond that went beyond words. A man at the back, someone she assumed was just a passerby, covered his mouth as tears rolled down his face. He wasn't the only one. She could see several people quietly wiping away tears. Their reaction surprised her, but it also filled her with a strange sense of pride. She had faced her fears and shown the truth of her talent, and it was working in ways she never expected. The hall felt almost magical. She could feel the energy of the audience shifting from doubt to admiration. People who had laughed before now leaned in, captivated by her music. The small keyboard she had brought to the stage was no longer just an instrument. It had become a bridge between her heart and theirs. Every note she played carried meaning, and the audience understood without a single word being spoken. She thought about all the hours of practice she had done alone, the times she had doubted herself, and the quiet moments of joy she felt while playing in her room. Every small victory, every tiny improvement had led to this moment. And now, standing there, she realized that the judgment of others could never define her worth. Music had always been her strength, and tonight, it had become her voice. As the final notes of her piece echoed through the hall, there was a pause. A brief silence hung in the air, as if everyone was taking a moment to process what they had just witnessed. Then, slowly, the applause began. It started with a few hesitant claps but quickly grew into a powerful wave of appreciation. People stood up, cheering and whistling, some even shouting words of encouragement. The audience's laughter from before was gone, replaced by admiration and respect. She smiled, tears in her own eyes, feeling the joy of accomplishment. The journey had been difficult, full of self-doubt and fear, but she had made it. She had turned the ridicule and skepticism into something beautiful. Her music had reached people's hearts, and in that moment, she knew that courage wasn't about being fearless. It was about moving forward despite fear. Backstage, other performers looked at her with newfound respect. Some came up to congratulate her, asking how she had managed to captivate the audience so completely. She answered humbly, saying it was all about loving the music and sharing it honestly. She didn't need to be perfect. She just needed to be herself. That night, as she left the hall, she felt a sense of pride and possibility she had never experienced before. The world felt bigger and more welcoming, and she realized that this was just the beginning of her journey. There would be more challenges, more skeptical audiences, and moments of doubt, but she had discovered something more powerful than fear. Her own strength and the ability to touch others through her passion. The memory of the audience laughing at her entry would remain, but it no longer held power over her. She had faced it, and her music had spoken louder than any mockery. She walked out into the night with her heart full of hope, knowing that one day, her music would reach even further, inspiring others to find courage in their own dreams. After the applause had settled, she felt a mix of relief and excitement. She knew her performance had been better than anything she had ever done, yet part of her was still nervous about what would come next. The judges had given her approving nods, and the audience had responded with genuine admiration, but the real test was yet to come. She had to maintain that connection, prove that the first performance wasn't a lucky accident. Backstage, she took a deep breath and reviewed what she wanted to play next. This piece was different. It was slower, more emotional, and deeply personal. She had composed it herself, inspired by the quiet moments she had spent alone in her room, dreaming and practicing. She wanted the audience to feel the story behind the notes, the hope, the struggle, and the courage it had taken to be on that stage. As she walked back onto the stage, she noticed the audience's eyes following her every step. There was a new kind of silence now, a quiet anticipation replacing the previous skepticism. She could see people leaning forward in their seats, waiting to see what she would do next. Some faces were still curious, but most now seemed ready to listen with genuine interest. She placed her hands on the keys and began. The first notes were soft, almost tentative, but they carried a gentle beauty that immediately captured attention. The hall seemed to hold its breath as she played, each note echoing with emotion. Her fingers moved with grace, bringing the music to life in a way that made the audience forget everything else. The room was no longer just a space for a performance. It had become a place where hearts connected through sound. She closed her eyes, letting the music guide her. The story she wanted to tell unfolded with every keystroke. The loneliness of late nights practicing alone, the excitement of small victories, the fear of being judged, and finally, the courage to step forward despite it all. Each note was a piece of her soul, shared with people who were beginning to understand her journey without a single word. Some members of the audience were visibly moved. A man in the middle row had his hands clasped tightly, eyes glistening with tears. A young woman near the front buried her face in her hands, overwhelmed by the beauty of the music. Even the judges, who had seen countless performances, were leaning forward, eyes fixed on her. their expressions showing genuine amazement. The laughter from earlier seemed like a distant memory, replaced entirely by awe and admiration. She noticed a few people who had been the loudest skeptics earlier, now completely silent, their jaws slightly dropped in surprise. They hadn't expected someone so young and untrained to evoke such deep emotion. It was a lesson she had learned herself many times. Never underestimate the power of honesty and passion in your craft. Talent alone wasn't enough. It was the heart behind the music that made the difference. As she played, she felt a connection to the audience that went beyond performance. She could sense their emotions, their quiet gasps, their small nods of understanding. It was as if the music was weaving an invisible thread between her and everyone in the room. She wasn't just playing for herself or to win a contest. She was sharing a piece of her life, her journey, and her heart. The piece she played built gradually, starting soft and gentle, then swelling into a powerful, moving climax. Each chord carried more emotion, more intensity, more of her own story. She could hear the collective intake of breath from the audience as the music reached its peak. Some were crying quietly, others holding hands, and many had tears running down their faces. She had never imagined music could have such an effect, but the proof was in the room around her. Midway through, a young boy near the front whispered to his mother, "She's amazing." It was simple, yet it carried the truth that transcended words. She had reached people who had doubted her, who had laughed at her entry, and now they were listening, fully present, completely captivated. That small acknowledgement, even though she didn't hear it clearly, gave her a rush of confidence that energized her performance. She didn't rush. She let every note breathe, every pause hold meaning. She wanted the audience to feel each emotion, to live the story with her. It was a delicate balance, but she had practiced it countless times. And now, she played not just with skill, but with emotion, experience, and courage. She could see the audience completely absorbed, and that sight gave her strength. The performance was no longer about fear. It was about expression, connection, and truth. As the final notes faded, there was a moment of silence. The hall seemed to hold its breath, suspended in awe of what had just happened. Then, slowly, the applause began. At first it was tentative, but it quickly grew louder, filling the room with clapping, cheering, and whistles. People were on their feet, shouting words of admiration and encouragement. The audience's response was overwhelming, a validation of everything she had worked for, every fear she had overcome. Tears ran down her cheeks as she took a bow, her heart pounding with a mixture of relief, pride, and disbelief. She had faced ridicule, judgment, and fear, and she had transformed those feelings into something beautiful. Music had been her voice when words failed, her courage when doubt threatened to overwhelm her, and her connection to others in the room. Backstage, performers and organizers came to congratulate her. Some were astonished, some inspired, and others curious about her journey. They asked how someone so young could play with such emotion, how she had managed to hold the audience so completely. She smiled, answering humbly that it wasn't about age or perfection. It was about love for the music and the courage to share it. As she left the stage, the hall behind her buzzing with admiration, she felt a sense of possibility she had never experienced before. She had proven to herself that fear could be transformed into courage, that ridicule could become motivation, and that honesty and passion could touch the hearts of strangers. The experience would stay with her forever, a reminder that one brave moment could change everything. That night, she walked home with her head held high, heart full of hope, and a mind racing with dreams. She had discovered a new side of herself, someone who could face fear, embrace vulnerability, and turn it into beauty. The journey ahead would have more challenges, more skeptics, and more doubts, but she now knew that music and courage could overcome them all. She had taken her first true step into a life full of possibility, and nothing would ever feel the same again. As she prepared for her next performance, the excitement and tension backstage were almost palpable. She could hear whispers of admiration and surprise from other performers, and even the organizers seemed eager to see what she would do next. There was a quiet energy in the air, a sense that something extraordinary was unfolding, and she could feel it too. She took a deep breath and reminded herself to focus on the music, not the attention, letting her emotions guide her fingers once again. When she walked onto the stage, the audience immediately noticed the change in her demeanor. She no longer appeared nervous or hesitant. There was a quiet confidence in the way she held herself, a sense of calm determination that captured the crowd's attention before she even touched the keys. The previous laughter and doubt seemed like distant memories, replaced by curiosity and anticipation. She sat down and placed her hands on the keys. The room was silent, as if the entire audience was holding its breath. The first notes rang out, soft and delicate, carrying an unexpected warmth. Each note was precise, yet full of feeling, and the audience began to sense the depth of her talent. It wasn't just skill. They could feel the emotion, the story behind the music, the honesty she put into every chord. Midway through the piece, the hall was transformed. People were leaning forward, eyes glistening with emotion. She noticed older members of the audience quietly wiping tears from their cheeks, young children gazing in awe, and even the judges leaning in, completely absorbed. The music had transcended words. It was a language that connected hearts and minds without a single sentence being spoken. She continued, her fingers dancing across the keys with a newfound fluidity. She had practiced this piece countless times, but tonight it felt different. She wasn't just playing notes. She was telling a story, sharing a piece of herself. She thought about all the moments that had led her here. The hours of practice, the self-doubt, the fear of being laughed at, and the encouragement of her family. Every memory fueled her performance, adding depth and authenticity. The audience was no longer just watching. They were experiencing. She could sense their emotions shifting, from curiosity to admiration, from skepticism to awe. Even those who had laughed when she first walked out were now silent, some with tears streaming down their faces. The music had reached them, touched them in ways they hadn't anticipated, and she felt a powerful connection with each person in the hall. Halfway through, she switched to a more complex section of the piece, one that required precise timing and control. Her hands moved effortlessly, guided by the emotion she poured into every note. She could feel the energy of the audience feeding her performance, their silent attention giving her strength. Every mistake, every doubt from before had disappeared, replaced by a flow of confidence and passion that made her play as if she had been born to do this. She noticed small gestures from the crowd, people leaning forward, clasping hands together, holding their breath during particularly delicate passages. The music had created a shared experience, a moment that united strangers through feeling. She realized that this was what she had always wanted. Not to impress, not to compete, but to connect, to move people with something that was truly hers. As the piece reached its climax, the room seemed to vibrate with emotion. The audience's reactions were subtle yet powerful. Soft gasps, quiet sniffles, and the occasional murmur of admiration. She felt their hearts alongside hers, every note a bridge between her soul and theirs. In that moment, she understood the power of music, not just as entertainment, but as a force that could convey human experience, raw and unfiltered. The final notes faded into a delicate silence. For a heartbeat, the hall seemed suspended in awe, unsure how to react. Then, slowly, the applause began. It started as a few scattered claps, then grew louder and stronger, until the entire room was erupting with cheers and standing ovations. People were calling her name, shouting encouragement, some even weeping openly. She bowed deeply, tears running down her cheeks, overwhelmed by the magnitude of the moment. Backstage, she was greeted by fellow performers and organizers who couldn't stop praising her. Some asked how she had managed to convey so much emotion. Others simply shook their heads in amazement. She felt a sense of humility and gratitude, knowing that her honesty and passion had made this impact. She realized that the courage to face her fears, to play with vulnerability, had created a magic that no technique alone could achieve. As she walked off the stage, the energy of the audience still ringing in her ears, she felt transformed. She had not only impressed the crowd but had also discovered a new part of herself, a resilience and strength she hadn't known she possessed. Music was no longer just a hobby or a dream. It had become a part of her identity, a tool for connection and expression. That night, she reflected on everything that had happened. The journey to this moment had been filled with fear, doubt, and the challenge of proving herself in a world that often judged by appearances. Yet, in overcoming those obstacles, she had discovered the power of authenticity, the importance of courage, and the beauty of sharing one's true self. Her performance had been more than a success. It had been a revelation, both for the audience and for herself. She knew there would be more challenges ahead, more skeptical crowds and moments of doubt, but she felt ready. She had learned that the fear of judgment could be transformed into motivation, that laughter could be replaced with admiration, and that honesty and passion would always resonate with people. As she walked home that evening, her heart was full of hope, her mind alive with dreams, and her spirit strengthened by the knowledge that she could face anything with courage and music as her guide. The room was alive with energy as she prepared for her final performance of the evening. The previous pieces had already captured the audience's hearts, but she knew she wanted to end with something unforgettable. This last piece was her most personal, the one that told the story of her journey, the fears she had faced, the struggles she had overcome, and the courage she had found along the way. It was both an ending and a beginning, a declaration of her love for music and the power it held. As she walked onto the stage, she felt a quiet confidence. The initial laughter that had greeted her earlier in the night was now just a memory, a reminder of how far she had come. The audience watched intently, their eyes filled with anticipation. She could feel their emotions, their curiosity, their admiration, and it strengthened her resolve. She sat at the keyboard, took a deep breath, and let her fingers rest lightly on the keys. The first notes were soft, almost whispering, but they immediately carried weight. The melody was delicate, yet full of emotion, weaving a story that was both personal and universal. As she played, she felt the room respond, a collective hush falling over the audience as they leaned in to listen. Every note, every pause, every gentle touch of the keys was a piece of her heart, shared openly and honestly. She closed her eyes and allowed herself to be fully immersed in the music. She thought of the hours spent practicing alone, the moments of doubt and fear, the encouragement from her family, and the determination that had brought her here. Each memory added depth to her performance, making it richer, more authentic. The audience, even without knowing her story, could feel the sincerity behind every note. As the piece progressed, the emotions in the room became palpable. She noticed people in the audience leaning forward, some clutching their hands, others quietly wiping tears from their eyes. A few young children stared in awe, their faces illuminated by wonder. Even the judges, who had seen countless performances, were captivated, their expressions softening with each passing moment. The music had transcended performance. It had become an experience shared between her and every listener. Halfway through, the piece swelled into a crescendo, powerful and moving. She poured all her energy into the keys, allowing the music to speak for her when words could not. The room seemed to vibrate with emotion, each note resonating deeply. She could feel the audience's hearts beating alongside hers, their emotions intertwining with hers in a shared, unspoken connection. Some members of the audience, who had been skeptical from the start, were now openly crying. Others sat in stunned silence, unable to move, as if afraid to break the spell that had been created. She noticed an elderly woman holding her hands to her chest, tears rolling down her face, and a young man in the back leaning forward, his eyes glistening with emotion. Each reaction reminded her of the power music held and the way it could reach deep into the human soul. She allowed the piece to ebb and flow, moving between gentle, tender passages and moments of intense, almost overwhelming emotion. Her fingers moved with a fluidity and grace that came not just from practice, but from the genuine connection she felt with the music and the audience. She could sense the collective breath of the room, the quiet gasps and subtle reactions that showed the impact of her performance. As the music neared its conclusion, she slowed, letting the notes linger, allowing each sound to resonate and carry the emotion to the audience fully. The final chord was held just long enough to let the silence speak for itself. When it faded, there was a heartbeat of quiet, a shared moment where everyone seemed suspended, processing the beauty and depth of what they had just experienced. Then the room erupted. Applause filled the hall, deafening and joyous. People were standing, cheering, clapping, and shouting their admiration. Tears flowed freely among the audience, some laughing through their sobs, others calling out her name in excitement. She stood, bowing deeply, her own tears streaming down her cheeks, overwhelmed by the outpouring of emotion and recognition. This was more than applause. It was a celebration of courage, vulnerability, and the universal language of music. Backstage, other performers and organizers rushed to congratulate her. They were astonished, some still in disbelief at how someone so young and seemingly inexperienced could evoke such a profound response. She answered their questions humbly, explaining that she simply let herself feel the music and share it honestly. Her performance was not about perfection but about connection, and the audience had felt it deeply. That night, as she walked home, the impact of the performance began to sink in. She thought about the people who had laughed at her entry, the doubts she had carried, and the fears she had faced. None of that mattered now. She had proven to herself, and to everyone watching, that courage and honesty could transform even the harshest judgments into admiration and respect. She had found her voice, and through it, had reached countless hearts. The memory of the audience's reaction, the tears, the applause, and the stunned faces stayed with her, a reminder of the transformative power of following one's passion. She realized that her journey was just beginning, that there would be more stages, more challenges, and more moments of fear. But she now knew that by embracing her talent and sharing it with sincerity, she could overcome anything and touch the lives of those around her. Her final thought that night was one of hope and gratitude. Music had given her courage, a way to express herself, and a bridge to connect with others. She had faced ridicule, doubt, and fear, and emerged stronger, more confident, and more aware of her own power. This experience had changed her, and she knew it would guide her in every step of her future. With her heart full and her spirit lifted, she looked forward to the road ahead, ready to embrace every opportunity and challenge that came her way. After her final performance, the echoes of applause lingered in the hall long after she had left the stage. The audience had been moved, captivated, and inspired in ways that went beyond simple entertainment. She walked backstage, feeling a mix of exhaustion, relief, and a profound sense of accomplishment. Her heart still raced from the intensity of the performance, but it was a different kind of excitement, the kind that comes from knowing you have truly shared something meaningful. Other performers came up to her, some with tears in their eyes, others with wide smiles. They expressed admiration and awe at what they had just witnessed. She listened, humbled, realizing that the effect of her performance had extended beyond her own expectations. People who had laughed when she first walked out were now among those who respected and celebrated her. The transformation in their perception made her feel both proud and deeply grateful. She thought back to the journey that had led her here. Hours of practice, moments of self-doubt, and the quiet encouragement of her family all contributed to this night. She realized that it was not just talent that had carried her through, but determination, courage, and the willingness to be vulnerable. By sharing her genuine emotions through music, she had created a connection that resonated with everyone present. The judges approached her, their expressions filled with admiration. They complimented her technique, her emotional expression, and her ability to captivate the audience. One of them asked how she had managed to maintain such composure while conveying so much feeling. She smiled, saying that it wasn't about composure, it was about honesty. When she played from her heart, the music came naturally, and the rest fell into place. As the evening wound down, she was approached by several audience members who wanted to express their gratitude for the experience. A woman told her that the performance had brought tears she hadn't felt in years, while a young man explained that her courage had inspired him to pursue his own passions despite fear. Each story reinforced her understanding that her music had power, not just as sound but as a force capable of inspiring and healing. Back at home, the experience replayed in her mind. She sat at her small keyboard in her room, reflecting on the events of the evening. She thought about how far she had come, from playing alone in her room to performing in front of a large, skeptical audience. The memory of laughter when she first walked out on stage still lingered, but it no longer held any power over her. She had transformed fear and doubt into something beautiful, something that touched others' hearts. She realized that the journey was far from over. There would be more stages, more audiences, and more challenges ahead. But she now understood the importance of courage, authenticity, and passion. By embracing her vulnerability and playing from her heart, she could create moments that left lasting impressions on others. The lessons she had learned tonight would guide her for the rest of her life. In the following days, the impact of her performance continued to unfold. People shared their experiences of the event on social media, praising her talent and the emotion she had conveyed. Invitations to perform at other venues began to arrive, and offers to collaborate with other musicians came as well. While the attention was new and overwhelming, she remained grounded, remembering that her true purpose was not fame, but the connection her music created. Her family celebrated quietly at home, proud of her achievements and the courage she had displayed. They spoke about the importance of following one's passion and remaining true to oneself, lessons that had been validated by the audience's reaction. She felt an even deeper bond with them, recognizing that their unwavering support had been a cornerstone of her success. She continued to practice, not out of pressure but from love for her craft. Each day at the keyboard reminded her of the magic of that night, the way music could transcend fear, bridge divides, and touch souls. She experimented with new compositions, eager to explore the depths of her abilities and emotions. The memory of the audience's tears and applause motivated her to grow, to push boundaries, and to share more of herself through music. Over time, she began to mentor younger musicians, encouraging them to embrace their own passions and overcome fears. She shared her story of the talent show, emphasizing the importance of courage, authenticity, and the transformative power of music. Her experience became an inspiration, proving that talent combined with determination and heart could break through doubt and judgment. Years later, she looked back on that first performance with a sense of gratitude and wonder. What had begun as a nervous, uncertain step onto a stage had become a turning point, a moment that defined her path and shaped her identity. The laughter that once seemed so cruel had become a distant memory, replaced by the enduring impact of her courage and artistry. She realized that the true lesson of that night was not about winning applause or recognition, but about believing in herself, embracing vulnerability, and sharing her passion wholeheartedly. In doing so, she had not only transformed her own life, but also touched the hearts of everyone who witnessed her performance. And in that knowledge, she found a lasting sense of fulfillment, purpose, and hope, ready to face every new challenge with courage and grace.